Do we have to continue from page number 35?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So till here, what we read about the peddler whose life was very monotonous, sad, very boring, because he had got failures in his life, because he felt that the life had not been kind to him. He had many hardships. He would travel, he would walk and walk on. He would keep on moving from one place to another for his survival. So the life was full of hardships, full of struggles. So while he had been walking one day, he had got this realization, since he had been a rat trap seller who had been making rat traps himself with the wire. However, this business did not turn out to be profitable to him. But he just equated the life with the rat trap, and he realized that the whole world is like the rat trap. That the life which offers richness, joys, and some of the things like bait, just as we provide a bait to lure the rat in the rat trap. Similarly, these temptations we have, and when we cannot resist our temptations, then we are fallen prey to these temptations and we allow ourselves to be trapped like that rat. And then it is very difficult for us to get rid of that situation, to escape that rat trap, to escape that trap of temptations. He had got this realization. He was very happy to think about it, because there had been so many people who had been very harsh to him. So he was amused to think of them when they are caught by such temptations, when they are trapped in such a way. So instead of being sympathetic to them, he was rather amused, good that they are trapped. But you see that if the universe, if this world is a trap, then we all are the victims of this trap. This is what he forgot, that he is a man living in this world. So how could he be spared? And this is what soon he realized, though he himself was also like that rat. That's why he had been thieving. That's why he had been begging. So the man, while going somewhere, he goes into a cottage, he takes the shelter, and the old man, he did not expect that the old man would be that kind that he would serve him food also. He thought that he simply needed shelter for a night, so he would be providing him with a shelter. But no, the old man, he was very happy to find him, because old man had been seeking companion since he was all alone. So he was very happy to serve him shelter and food as well. Not only that, but he also entertained him. He shared his life story with him. How he had been earning 30 kroners by selling cow's milk, which the peddler could not believe. Just to ensure him, just to make him believe, he showed his notes, which he never knew that it would be picked by the peddler. And the peddler did. The moment the peddler, he had stolen that money from his pouch, that very moment, the peddler had allowed himself to be trapped by this rat trap world. Had he resisted, had he thought for a moment, however, the money had been a great temptation for him. But if he had thought that no, the man had been so kind to me, so generous to me, I should not be doing this. But he didn't do, because he could not resist his temptation. He had no control on it. That's why he had stolen. The rat when he's lured by the bait, does not know, does not think that he would be trapped. And then he goes in and he is trapped. So just like that rat, this peddler had also allowed himself to be trapped. He leaves that cottage. Now there was a very comfortable, straight and smooth passage for his movement, that he could easily walk on the highway. But he had just withdrawn that idea and he had chosen to walk through the deep forest to hide himself. This is the trap. This is the trap, one after another, how we are caught, and it is difficult to move out. He is lost in that forest. He does not know where to go. Every time he decides to go on a particular path, and after a while he realizes that he is still at the same place. So then he realizes that now this was his turn, that he had been befooled by the bait. And that bait was the 30 kroner lying in the old man's pouch. Now the whole forest appeared to him like a prison of branches of the tree, thick bushes, where it was impassable for him. It was difficult for him to travel, to walk, and he didn't know where to move. It was difficult for him to escape, right? This is what we had done till yesterday. Now, next from page number 35, it was late in December, which indicates that the story takes place when? In the winter. It was in December, and you just imagine Swedish backgrounds, so that what you think the weather could be. Darkness was already descending over the forest. It was winter, December, and the forest was turning dark very fast. This increased the danger and increased also his gloom and despair. The darker the forest was becoming. The darker the forest was becoming, because the day was about to end. And it was becoming more a grave concern for the paddler. It was appearing more dangerous for him to stay in the forest. He was becoming more despair, helpless, and sad. Finally, he saw no way out. He did not find any way. He did not find any way out. He did not find any idea how to escape. He was so helpless that he sank down on the ground. He sank down on the ground. He just sat down. He was so tired. He sat down on the ground, tired to death, thinking that his last moment had come. He was so terrified and so tired, thinking that the day is ending and he could not escape. He thought that he would not be able to survive now. But just as he laid his head on the ground, he heard a sound, a hard, regular thumping. Thumping sound of beating something. There was no doubt as to what that was. He could easily make out what that sound could be. Whether he was familiar with the sound or not, but he had knowledge of that sound. He raised himself, he got up. When he heard the sound, he got up. Now the sound meaning the people must be somewhere around. The sound meaning some activity is going. Sound meaning life and activity is going on somewhere within the forest or nearby. So it is not loneliness. So at least he had got rid of that feeling of loneliness. Those are the hammer strokes from an iron mill, he thought. He thought, oh yes, there in the background, there are iron mills. So it must be the thumping sound of hammer strokes. Hammer, you know, It's a tool. There must be people nearby. So he was very hopeful that there is the possibility of the presence of the people nearby. He summoned all his strength. He summoned all his strength. He gathered courage, got up, and he staggered in the direction of the sound. He staggered. He could not walk steadily, but he did walk in the same direction where he could hear the sound from. The Ramseo iron works, which are now closed down, were not so long ago a large plant with smelter, rolling mill, and forge. Ramseo iron works we read earlier also in the lesson. If you remember, the old man in the cottage, he had told him that once he had been working in Ramseo Iron Works, right? Now, Ramseo Iron Works, recently, some time back only, it has been closed now. It was a large plant with smelter. Smelter is a machine which is used to give a shape, which is used to mold the metal, right? And rolling mill is the machine which is used to flatten the metal sheet and then roll it. And forge is that very place in an iron mill where the metal is heated. So it was a large plant where there were smelters in use, rolling mills in use, and there were the forges. There were the avenues where the metal was heated. In the summertime, long lines of heavily loaded barges and scows slid down the canal, which led to a large inland lake. In the summertime, there could be seen the lines of heavily loaded barges. Barges are the small flat-bottom boats which are carrying supplies on the canal or the rivers. And scows are also large flat-bottomed boats, but they are carrying cargoes from ship to ship. So these barges and scows, they move down the canal and then they carry the supply to the inland lake, to the iron mills. And in the winter time, the roads near mill were black from all the coal dust which sifted down from the big charcoal crates. And in the winter days, all these roads nearby, near the forest, near the iron mill, they had turned black. Why? Because of the coal dust. Because of the coal dust blowing that moved, that blowed from the charcoal crates when they were moving from because of the transport movement also. A lot of transport movement also. The roads had turned dusty with coal, so they were completely black. During one of the long dark evening, just before Christmas, the master smith and his helpers sat in the dark forge near the furnace, waiting for the pig iron, which had been put in the fire to be ready to put on the anvil. It was the evening, one dark evening. It was just before the Christmas. Master smith, blacksmith, and his helper, they were sitting in the dark forge near the furnace. Furnaces, when the metal is heated, when the metal is burnt in the furnace factory. When he had been doing all this, waiting for the pig iron. Pig iron is small particles of metal which are beaten on this anvil. For anvil, I have put up a picture here. You can see. कभी आप जाएंगे ना किसी वेल्डिंग वर्कशॉप पे जहाँ पर वेल्डिंग होती है या आयरन का काम होता है, उस वर्कशॉप में जाइए तो you will find these hammers and these animals also there. Every now and then, one of them got up to stir the glowing mass with a long iron bar. Glowing mass of what? Glowing mass of iron that was heated. What is that glowing mass? Because it was heated. It was burning. So it turns red, glowing. जैसे मैंने आपको बताया कि वेल्डिंग की किसी फैक्ट्री में जाइए तो वहां आपको ऐसा देखने को मिलेगा. And while these men working there, they were stirring that iron bar which was being heated in the furnace. They had been dripping with perspiration. They had been sweating badly. And this was the custom that he wore nothing but a long shirt and a pair of wooden shoes. This was the rule that the people working there, they would wear a long shirt and a pair of wooden shoes. What for? For their protection. That is to avoid any kind of casualty. Is that clear? Is that clear, Manish?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All the time there were many sounds to be heard in the forge. The big bellows groaned and the burning coal cracked. He had been listening to the sounds. The more he was going towards that side, he could hear many sounds. Now, what were these sounds coming from the forge? These sounds were definitely the stroke of hammer, the work on anvils, and the big bellows groaned. Big bellows are the airbags that emitted air to burn the fire. And the burning coal that also cracked, so that caused a lot of noise. The fire boys shoveled charcoal into the maw of the furnace with a great deal of clatter. And the fire boy, he shoveled, he was moving, he was shifting charcoal into the maw of the furnace, into the mouth, into the gap of the furnace, into the gap of the furnaces. Furnace, if let me tell you, कभी आप किसी ट्रेडिशनल बेकरी में जाते हैं ना, राइट? तो वहाँ एक काव के शेप में फर्नेस होता है, where the fire is burnt, right? So it's that mouth of the furnace. And when all this is done, it causes a lot of sound. Outside roared the waterfall. Now, adding to the sound of all these activities which were happening in the iron mill, there were also the sounds of the waterfall. And since it was windy the weather, so sharp north wind whipped the rain against the brick-tiled roof. Must be raining, and it was windy as well. So the rain pelting on the tiled roof had also been adding to the sound along with the wind. This whole paragraph means to say that it was late evening, very late evening, and in the iron mill, the activity, the life, the work was going on when this peddler goes there. Now, what does he do there? It was probably on account of all this noise that the blacksmith did not notice that a man had opened the gate and entered the forge until he stood close up to the furnace. The people could not enter like this, but anyway, this man entered. The peddler entered. Blacksmith, he was busy with his work. He did not notice the presence of the peddler, maybe because of that sound. But when this peddler came close to the furnace and stood there, then only the blacksmith had been aware of his presence, but he did not take any interest in that. He did not give any importance to him. Surely it was nothing unusual for poor vagabonds without any better shelter for the night to be attracted to the forge by the glow of light which escaped through the sooty panes. For him, it was nothing unusual. It was very common. Usually, the vagabonds, the wanderers, the strangers, they would be passing from there and they would come to the forge when they would find the fire burning. Why? To come because they could see the glow of light through the sooty panes. Sooty panes, panes meaning window panes, and sooty panes meaning they are dusty. They are dusty. Through the dusty window panes, these wanderers, they could see the glow of light, which would suggest them that yes, fire is burning. So they would come in, they would break in. What for? To come in to warm themselves in front of the fire. So it was nothing unusual if this peddler had come, because often the wanderers, they would come and they would sit there just to warm themselves. The blacksmiths glanced only casually. You see that they had looked at him very casually. It was nothing special for them, and indifferently at the intruder. He looked the way people of his type usually did, with a long beard, dirty, ragged, with a bunch of rat traps dangling on his chest. The peddler wasn't looking uncommon. He was looking common man, like a common vagabond, just as the other vagabonds who were coming over there, they also used to appear very dirty, ugly looking, with long shabby beard, wearing rags, worn out clothes. And this man in particular, with a bunch of rat traps hanging around on his chest. So the blacksmiths, they did not find him odd, or they did not find him an unusual man. He was just like many other vagabonds who were coming there to take shelter. Right. He asked permission to stay, and the master blacksmith nodded a haughty consent without honoring him with a single word. Anyway, the peddler, he did ask for the permission if he could spend a night in the forge. And the master blacksmith, he just gave his consent in a very arrogant way. How arrogant way? Without looking at him, he gave him consent. He did not say anything. He just simply nodded. He moved his head. The tramp did not say anything either. The tramp meaning also vagabond, a wanderer, a traveler. He did not say anything. He had not come there to talk, but only to warm himself and sleep. He was very focused. That he knew that he had come only to warm himself and to sleep. So it did not bother him whether the man had spoken to him, whether he had shown any respect to him or not. He simply wanted to spend the time, to spend the night there. In those days, the Ramseo iron mill was owned by a very prominent iron master, whose greatest ambition was to ship out good iron to the market. He watched both night and day to see that the work was done as well as possible, and at this very moment, he came into the forge on one of his nightly rounds of inspection. Yes, the peddler had got to know that Ramseo Iron Mill, the owner was a prominent iron master who was making a brisk business. He was looking after all the work himself. So that's why personally he would come on visits for inspection to check that the work is going on smoothly. Naturally, the first thing he saw was, just a minute. The first thing he saw was the tall ragamuffin who had eased his way so close to the furnace that steam rose from his wet rags. Anyway, this iron master, this owner of the mill, as he came the peddler caught his attention. He had noticed this tall ragamuffin, this man, ragamuffin meaning the one who was wearing rags, that how easily he had walked in so close to the furnace, that his wet rags, they were also steaming. The iron master did not follow the example of the blacksmiths, who had hardly deigned to look at the stranger. The other blacksmiths, they would not look at the peddlers or the vagabonds. Just as you see that the blacksmith present over there, he did. He just didn't look at the peddler and he gave him consent, okay, you can sit. But he did not do this because these blacksmiths, they thought it was their below dignity to talk to such strangers. But he was the owner. He didn't think so. He just walked close up to him, looked at him very carefully, then tore off his slouch hat to get a better view of his face. He wanted to know. He was iron master. He was the owner. He was curious. He was inquisitive. He wanted to know who this man was. So he walked close to him. He looked at him, surveyed him, and then he just tore off his slouch hat. Slouch hat is the hat which is bent on one side. He just wanted to see his face clearly. That's why he just removed his slouch hat. But of course, it is you, Nils Olof, he said. How you do look? And the moment he saw the peddler, he addressed him as Nils Olof. That is one of his acquaintances, one of his known people. He said, oh, you are Nils Olof. What is it? Actually, the owner, the iron master, he had mistaken the peddler for the man Nils Olof, whom he knew. The man with the rat traps had never before seen the iron master at Alonso and did not even know what his name was. For him, for the peddler, the iron master was completely a stranger because he had never seen him. He didn't even hear his name. But it occurred to him, if the fine gentleman thought he was an old acquaintance, he might perhaps throw him a couple of kroner. Now look at this. He is talking about this word as a rat trap and how he allows himself to be trapped. Soon the idea comes in his mind that he has mistaken him as his old acquaintance. Now the peddler was going to make use of this opportunity. He is going to take an advantage of this mistake of the iron master, because he thought that maybe if he knows him, that he would give some kroner, some money to him. Therefore, he did not want to undeceive him all at once. So all at once, he did not want to say anything. He did not want to pretend. He did not want to give even an inch of an idea that he is not what the and the peddler, he told him that in my life, there had been very, very difficult situations. Worse situations. Life had been very bad for me. In this way, he gains sympathy. You should not have resigned from the regiment, said the iron master. That was a mistake. If only I had still been in the service at that time, it never would have happened. Well, now, of course, you will come home with me. Now, what is it? The iron master thought the peddler one of his old friends, one of his old friends who was an old fellow soldier. an old soldier, an old regimental comrade. So he tells him that you had resigned. Actually, what it is, that Iron Master had a friend with the name Nils Olof. He had resigned from the regiment. He thought this man is the same friend. So he tells him, oh, you have resigned from the regiment, you should not have resigned. I was not there in this service at that time. Had I been in service, I would not have let you resign. And then he invites him to his home. Anyway, now you come home with me. To go along up to the manor house and be received by the owner like an old regimental comrade. That, however, did not please the tramp. Manor house is the countryside house. Now the peddler was confused. He was puzzled. He did not like it. He found it very unpleasant. He was very worried that now he is being invited to the manor house and he would be received by the owner. Not a peddler, not a cheat, not a thief, not a rat-trap seller. So he was quite perplexed at that time. And however, this did not, the tramp did not this idea. But what to do? No, I couldn't think of it, he said, looking quite alarmed. He was quite alarmed. Yes?
Ma'am, what is a manor house?
Manor house is the countryside house. The countryside house, do you know? See, countryside houses are usually in the rustic areas, in the rural areas, usually on the outskirts of the highways we find. All right? Is that clear?
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Now, no, I couldn't think of it, he said, looking quite alarmed. Looking quite alarmed, he was frightened. The peddler was frightened. The peddler was feared. What fear he had? Why do you think he was frightened? It's good. He was served food and shelter by the old man in the cottage. And now he was being offered by this owner of an iron mill. So why not to go? He is not welcoming this idea, but he is frightened. What was the fear there? Yes, Manish, what was the fear? Why was he afraid? The fear was that, yes.
Ma'am, I didn't remember.
The fear was that he had stolen the money. He was afraid that he would be caught. One thing. Another thing is that he is not his real friend. His real identity would be revealed. However, it is none of his faults, right? But why didn't he say at the first instance that no, he is not Nils Olof? He should have said, right? So that means he had wrong intention. That's why he was frightened that his real identity would be revealed. And in this way, the owner would come to know his real background. He thought of the 30 kroner. But why not reveal his own identity? Because he thought of that 30 kroner. 30 kroner he got from the old man's house. Maybe he would get more the money from this man. To go up to the manor house would be like throwing himself voluntarily into the lion's den. So there was fear at the same time, as I said, that he thought of that 30 kroner, that he is a thief. He had stolen the money and accepted house, meaning that he himself is voluntarily, willingly pushing himself into trouble, pushing oneself into a lion's den, into trouble. He was pushing himself into trouble. He only wanted a chance to sleep here in the forge. He never wanted the manor house. He simply wanted to spend a night then move away quietly as inconspicuously as possible. As inconspicuously meaning invisibly, meaning he would be secretly going away from that place. He would not be noticed by the people. Nobody would notice him. He would just spend the night there and he would move away. So he didn't want this kind of invitation. But at the same time, definitely at the back of his mind, he did have this intention. If he goes to the manor house, he would get some money, right? The iron master assumed that he felt embarrassed because of his miserable clothing. The iron master, he thought that the man had not accepted the invitation because he must be conscious, he must be embarrassed of his dirty clothes, the rags he was wearing. Please don't think that I have such a fine home that you cannot show yourself there. He tries to prepare, he tries to encourage the peddler. He tries to motivate the peddler to accept the invitation and visit his house. He says, don't think that I have such a fine house and you do not deserve it or you cannot be permitted there. Elizabeth is dead. His wife gives the details. He says, my wife is no more. My boys are abroad. His sons had been away. And there is no one at home except my oldest daughter and myself. He says, we are two people only in the house. Me, any company for Christmas. Now come along with me and help us make Christmas food disappear a little faster. Both the father and the daughter, they were alone in the cottage. It was a Christmas Eve. They wanted company so that they could enjoy Christmas Eve. So they were happy to find him. However, the Iron Master had mistaken his identity. But that's why he is inviting that he would be giving them the company to celebrate Christmas. So he says that like so many other years, this time also they thought that they would be celebrating Christmas alone without any company. But now he should come to their house and he should give them company so that they celebrate Christmas. But the stranger said no and again no. Iron Master saw that he must give in. But Iron Master, he never wanted to give up. He thought that no, the man should be called to home. So what he did, it looks as though Captain Von Stell preferred to stay with you tonight, Strong, he said to the bastard blacksmith and turned on his heel. It looks as though Captain Von Stell preferred to. Captain Von Stell was the Iron Master, right? He said to the master blacksmith that he preferred to stay with you tonight, and then he moved away, but he laughed to himself as he went away. And the blacksmith who knew him understood very well that he had not said his last word. It was not more than half an hour before they heard the sound of carriage wheels outside the forge. What had happened? They had heard the sound of the carriage. There has come somebody from the manor house. A new guest came in, but this time it was not the iron master. He had sent his daughter, apparently hoping that she would have better powers of persuasion than he himself. He had tried to convince the peddler to visit their home and celebrate Christmas, but the peddler refused. He could not convince him. So what he did, he went home, Iron Master went home, and he sent his daughter. He sent his daughter. He thought that his daughter must be more convincing. She would be able to convince him, and then this visitor whom he thought his old regimental comrade, that he would come. She entered, followed by a valet. Valet is an attendant. She entered accompanied by an attendant, carrying on his arm a big fur coat. The attendant was carrying a big fur coat. She was not at all pretty, but seemed modest and quite shy. In the forge, everything was just as it had been earlier. In the evening, the master blacksmith and his apprentice still sat on their bench, and iron and charcoal still glowed in the furnace, meaning in the iron mill, the work was going on as usual. There was no change. And the stranger had stretched himself out on the floor, lay with a piece of pig iron under his head and his hat pulled down over his eyes. He was resting, just lying on the floor. As soon as the young girl caught sight of him, she went up and lifted his hat. The young girl, she went, that is the Iron Master's daughter, she went, yes. You want to say something, Manish?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So she just saw him, right? And she lifted his hat. The man was evidently used to sleeping with one eye open. So as his hat was removed, he jumped up abruptly and he was a bit frightened. My name is Adla Wilmanson. She gave her introduction. My father came home and said that you wanted to sleep here in the forge tonight. And then I asked permission to come and bring you home to us. He has given me the permission to bring you home. I'm so sorry, Captain, that you're having such a hard time. As told by the father, she also thought that the peddler was a captain. Peddler was his father, her father's old regimental comrade. She is feeling sorry for his condition, that he had such a difficult time. She looked at him compassionately, sympathetically. She was very sympathetic, must be sympathetic, must be compassionate. You see that's why she is so generous, that she had come all the way to pick up peddler. And then she would give him food and shelter as well. Then she noticed that the man was afraid. But the girl had been intelligent enough. She had observed the behavior and the expressions of the man. She could make out that there was something wrong with the man, as he appeared to be very frightened. Either he has stolen something or else he has escaped from jail. She thought. She could make out there was something wrong. She thought that either this man is a thief, he had stolen something, or he had been in the jail and he had run away from the jail. And she added quickly, you may be sure, Captain, that you will be allowed to leave us just as freely as you came. Only please stay with us over Christmas Eve. So immediately she said, whenever you want to leave us, you can leave us. But please come for Christmas Eve at least. So now do you understand that what was the idea of inviting him actually? They wanted a company. They were seeking for a company to celebrate Christmas. So she might have thought that even if he was a cheat, even if he was a thief, at least he would be their companion. He would be their company to celebrate Christmas. Right? Such is the spirit of Christmas. This is what we get to know here. She said this in such a friendly manner that the Rattrap peddler must have felt confidence in her. The girl appeared to be so nice, so friendly, that the Rattrap peddler, he prepared himself to believe the girl. It would never have occurred to me that you will bother me yourself, miss. He said, I'll come at once. It's a sign of, it's an expression of gratitude. He said, I never expected. He never expected that the girl would come, his daughter would come like this to pick him. He said, yes, I'll come. And he agreed to go. He was ready to go. He accepted the fur coat which the valet handed him with a deep bow, threw it over his rags, and followed the young lady out to the carriage without granting the astonished blacksmith so much as a glance. He just did not care about the presence of the blacksmiths, and he followed the girl. But while he was riding up to the manor house, he had evil forebodings. Evil forebodings meaning he was considering that something bad was going to happen. He had that feeling. He had that feeling that something bad is going to happen. While he was going to the manor house, he felt that there is something wrong. And something bad is going to happen to him. Definitely, his real identity would be revealed and everything would be disclosed. The next day was Christmas Eve, and when the iron master came into the dining room, why the devil did I take that fellow's money? He thought. Now I am sitting in the trap and will never get out of it. And then the peddler, he regrets. He regrets momentarily, not really, for some time. He is regretting why he had stolen that money. It is all because of being lured by the bait of that money that he could not say no, he could not check himself, and he had been trapped. And now it is difficult for him to escape. The next day was Christmas Eve, and when the iron master came into the dining room for breakfast, he probably thought with satisfaction of his old regimental comrade whom he had run across so unexpectedly. The next day was Christmas Eve. In the morning, the iron master came to the dining room for breakfast. He was very relieved. He was very satisfied. He was quite happy. What for? That he had come across, he had met an old friend of him, an old regimental comrade. First of all, we must see to it that he gets a little flesh on his bones, he said to his daughter. He gets a little flesh on his bones, meaning he gets sufficient food. He tells his daughter, take care of the man, serve him proper food. The daughter who was busy at the table. And then we must see that he gets something else to do than to run around the country selling rat traps. Yes, I'm going to till this line, okay? Yes.
Ma'am, because my geography class is at 5, ma'am, that's all.
Okay, I'm just going to, yeah. So, and then we must see that he gets something else to do than to run around the country selling rat traps, meaning they wanted to work as his beneficiary. They wanted to benefit him as they had seen his poor condition, that he was selling rat traps and he was struggling, right? So the next week we will continue from the page number 39. All right?
Yes, ma'am.